I raised my kids, I cooked for my husband, I sacrificed everything, and yet, on my 70th birthday, they all abandoned me. But what they didn't know was that I had been keeping a secret for 50 years that would change everything. For most of my life, I was the kind of woman people overlooked. A quiet wife, a mother who did what she was told, a grandmother who was expected to stay in the corner and knit sweaters no one wore. My husband, God rest his soul, was a strict man. He believed women were meant to stay silent, and I obeyed for decades. I cooked 3 meals a day, I cleaned every corner of the house, I raised our children almost single-handedly, because he was always working or out with friends. But as the years went on, my children grew distant. They started treating me not as their mother, but as a servant. Mom, do this. Mom, watch the kids.
Mom, you don't understand how the world works now.
I smiled through it, because that's what mothers do. Or at least, that's what I thought. Then came my 70th birthday. I waited all day. I set the table with care, made my favorite dishes, even baked a cake. I told myself, surely they'll remember, surely this time they'll surprise me. Do you know what happened?
Nobody came.
Not my daughter, not my son, not even my grandchildren. The house was so quiet I could hear the clock tick louder than my heartbeat.
He sat there staring at the empty chairs, and something inside me broke.
But then, something else sparked, something I had buried for years. Because here's the truth, I wasn't always this silent, obedient woman. Long before I became grandma, I was a fighter. I had dreams, passions, and a secret that I never told anyone. You see, when I was young, I wanted to be a writer. I filled notebooks with stories, poems, and journals. But when I got married, my husband forbade it. He said writing was a waste of time, and he made me burn many of my notebooks.
You bad on the outside.
But secretly, I hid my best work away in a trunk in the attic. For 50 years, I kept writing in secret, pouring all my pain, love, and hope into those pages. That night, on my lonely birthday, I went to the attic, pulled out that dusty trunk, and cried over those pages. But instead of giving up, I decided, if my family won't see my worth, the world will. The very next morning, I mailed some of my writings to a small publishing house. Weeks later, I got a call. My words touched them so deeply, they wanted to publish my memoir. At 70 years old, I became a published author.
My story, my pain, my truth, it'll come alive in print.
And when my book hit the shelves, people from all over wrote to me, saying my words gave them courage. Do you know what happened next? Suddenly, my children who had no time for me were calling every day. Mom, we're so proud of you. Mom, can we come visit? My grandchildren bragged in school that their grandma was an author. And on my next birthday, the table that was once empty was overflowing with people. But here's the thing, I didn't write for them. I wrote for me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't just grandma. I was me, a woman with a voice. And let me tell you this, silence is not weakness. Sometimes, silence is just the beginning of the loudest story you'll ever tell. Story number 2. I never thought my own family would betray me, but on the day I needed them most, they did. I was in the hospital, weak and trembling, tubes running from my arm, the doctor telling me I had to stay overnight for observation. I called my son, the boy I carried for 9 months, the child I nursed through fevers and heartbreaks, and I asked him to come. He said he was too busy. I called my daughter, the girl whose hair I braided every morning before school, the one I stayed awake with during her endless nights of crying when her marriage fell apart, and she told me she couldn't because she had dinner plans. So I lay there in a cold white bed, staring at the ceiling, and I realized that in the end, I was alone. For years, I gave them everything. I worked double shifts, sold my jewelry, went hungry so they could eat. I patched clothes, polished shoes, and stood in long lines just to get them the best I could afford. And when they grew older, I became the free babysitter, the family cook, the one who always understood. But the truth was, They didn't understand me. They didn't see me. They saw convenience. They saw obligation. They never saw the woman behind the apron. That night in the hospital, a nurse came in, a girl no older than my granddaughter. She looked at me with more kindness than my own blood had shown. She tucked in my blanket, asked if I was in pain, and even held my hand for a while. I almost cried, because for the first time in a long time, someone treated me like I mattered. When I got discharged the next morning, I didn't call my children. I called a taxi, went home, and sat in my quiet living room. And then I made a choice. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life waiting for them to value me. I picked up the phone, called an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years, and we met for tea. That one meeting turned into weekly visits, and then I joined a small community group in town. Slowly, I built a life outside of being mom and grandma. I started painting again, something I hadn't touched since my 20s. I took walks, I laughed with friends, I even traveled. And when my children finally noticed my distance, they began calling, asking why I was so different. For once, I told them the truth, because I finally remembered who I am. Silence had made me invisible, but stepping into my own life made me shine again. I may be old, but I am not gone. And I want every forgotten grandmother out there to know, you don't have to wait for your family to give you love. You can give it to yourself, and it will be more powerful than anything they could ever offer. Story number 3. I was only 16 when I left my parents' home with nothing but a small bag and a heart full of dreams. Back then, I thought love could conquer everything. I believed the man who promised me the world when he slipped a simple ring on my finger. He wasn't rich, he wasn't gentle, but he was the only one who looked at me like I mattered. Or at least, that's what I thought. I was young and naive, and I built my whole life around him. 4 years, I cooked for him, washed his clothes by hand, took care of his house, and bore his children. I thought this was what love was supposed to be: sacrifice, obedience, patience. But over time, I began to realize I wasn't his partner. I was his servant. He spoke, I listened. He wanted, I gave. And even when his words turned sharp and cruel, even when his hands left marks I tried to hide, I stayed. Because in my heart, I told myself it was my duty. Women like me didn't walk away. When my children came, I thought they would be my light. And they were, at least for a while. Their little hands holding mine, their laughter echoing through the small house. We didn't have much, but I gave them everything I had. I remember nights when the cupboard was almost empty. He would spend what little money we had drinking with his friends, and I would lie to the children, saying I wasn't hungry so they could eat. My stomach twisted in pain, but their full bellies made me smile. That's what motherhood felt like to me, choosing to suffer quietly so they didn't have to. But children grow, and they don't always remember the sacrifices that raised them. My son, the boy I once carried on my back when his shoes wore out, now barely calls. My daughter, the girl I once braided hair for every morning before school, only visits when she needs money or babysitting. Sometimes, I sit alone in this old house, staring at the walls, wondering if they even realize how much of my life I gave up for them.
The world forgets women like me.
My husband is gone now, buried years ago, and sometimes I wonder if he took the last pieces of me with him. But here's the thing, I have a secret no one knows. For 50 years, I wrote letters.
Letters he never sent.
Every time he hurt me, every time I felt invisible, every time I wanted to scream but couldn't, I wrote it down. I poured myself onto paper. Boxes of them fill the trunk in my bedroom. My children don't know about it, but those letters, they are me.
My voice, my anger, my dreams, my broken heart.
The world may never read them, but they are proof that I lived, that I felt, that I mattered.
Last winter, something changed.
I fell sick, the kind of sickness that makes you wonder if this is your last year. Alone in the hospital bed, I thought of all the years I had given away, all the moments I never claimed for myself. And then, for the first time in decades, I made a promise. not to anyone else,